Hello everyone, and welcome to a midweek driving vlog. I'm going to make this one to piggyback off of last week's midweek video, which was talking about driving in Japan. And I wanted to just add a couple of things that I forgot to mention last week, but mostly today is to talk about getting a Japanese driver's license. What the process is like, who needs to do it, why you should do it. If you're new to the channel, I do two types of videos here usually. One is my main video, which is walking around a Japanese neighborhood. It's like a walk and talk style of video. I talk about Japanese society, life, and culture. Having been here as a foreign resident for 20 years, I have some insights and things that I can talk about. That's my main video on the channel, but recently I've started doing some of these driving vlogs when I have time during a commute or I'm driving somewhere for business, etc. Decided that more technical topics like getting a driver's license, or more personal topics like I'm going to be releasing a video soon about my personal story about why I came to Japan and why I stayed here. That's more basically, it's a better topic for this type of longer vlog, so you can enjoy some Japanese countryside as I drive about and listen to whatever the particular topic of the week is. Even if you're not interested in the topic, well, I have to say that I'm trying to film while driving on interesting roads and through interesting countryside. So hopefully that, just enjoying the drive and my voice as kind of a ASMR experience might be of interest as well. Getting a Japanese driver's license. If you are unlucky enough to be American in Japan, that means you will have to get a Japanese driver's license through the process of actually taking the driver's test. Depending on what country you're from, a lot of countries have a reciprocity agreement with Japan where you can just exchange. Basically, if you have a Japanese driver's license and you go to Canada, you can get a Canadian license. And if you're Canadian, you come to Japan, you can just change over your license and get Japanese without taking the driving test. Unfortunately, Americans can't do that. When do you actually have to get this? Well, the way the law works, in my understanding, is you can legally drive in Japan for a year on your old license through international agreements. I mean, a lot of people don't realize this, but you don't actually have to get an international license to drive in Japan if you come from certain countries that have an agreement with Japan. And America is one of those. Basically, the international license just gives you kind of a translation of license information, so it kind of eases the process if you were to get into any kind of accident or stopped by the police for some reason, etc. But technically your US license should be valid for a year in Japan. Now again, I'm not a lawyer, so don't take this as legal advice, please. That's my understanding of how it works. But after a year, you are legally obligated to change your license to a Japanese. You have to get an official Japanese license, which makes sense if you think about it. Problem is, if you're an American, that means you will actually have to take the driver's test. So at some point, you'll have to go to a driver's center, and there will be some paperwork to fill out. They'll probably make copies of your American license, and there will be a written test. I believe that some countries, when you switch over your license, even if you don't have to take the driving test, you still have to take the paper test. And in that case, don't worry about it. It's ridiculously easy. Like, if you spent any part of your life driving, the questions on it are incredibly intuitive, simple. They're not even that many questions from what I remember. So yeah, the written test is not anything to worry about. You don't have to study for it unless you're a paper driver you got a license a long time ago and you've never actually driven on it. You just have a license for ID sake or something. Then you might have to think about it. But if you have any experience as a driver, the written test is not going to throw you. And they have it published in multiple different languages. So I took it in English, and I know you can take it in other languages, like Chinese, for example. So yeah, don't be worried about the written test. But the driver's test, if you have to take that, there are some very fine points of advice that I would give you. First and foremost, don't expect to pass it on the first try. Almost no one does. In fact, I've never heard of anyone passing on the first try. It's probably happened somewhere sometime, but no. I mean, and the reason is, the best way to illustrate the reason why people fail this driver's test, I should say why foreigners fail this driver's test, is because they don't know how to take the test, not because they don't know how to drive. To best illustrate this, my friend took the test 9 times and finally passed on the 10th. And it was around the 7th or 8th time when the policeman who was administering the test, who had administered it to my friend multiple times before that, so they kind of knew each other by this point, he told my friend, look, you're a great driver. It's clear that you actually are a good driver. You're just terrible at this test. That tells you all you need to know. You're taking the test. You're not demonstrating your driving skills per se. I know that sounds weird. It seems like a very uniquely Japanese way of testing someone's driving skills. But here, let's go through the reasons why the test is not like real driving. First of all, now again, I'm making an assumption that this is like a standard thing. I've heard from other people that this is how it was that when they did it, but it might be possible that certain driver centers end up having a slightly different system. So don't take this all as rote gospel, but I believe this is relatively standard. You show up at the test site and there's a driver's course, like an actual, it's this paved course with street signs and a railroad crossing and basically made to look like situations you could encounter in the real world. And that's the first point, is that you're taking your driver's test on a course, not on regular roads. So keep that in mind. You show up at the course and there are 3 routes that you might be asked to take through the course. A or B or C route, or maybe it was A and E and U route, the hiragana, the Japanese writing system. And you draw one out of a hat, and that will be the one you're supposed to take. And you are supposed to have that course memorized. So you need to have these 3 separate courses memorized, so whichever one you pull out of the hat, you're supposed to turn left if you're on Route A. But if you're on Route B, you're going to be turning right at this intersection. And you have to have the course memorized, which, first and foremost, how does that help your real driving schools in the real world? Driving skills, rather, in the real world. What does memorizing a course have to do with good driving? Who knows, but you have to memorize the course. Then you'll get into your car with the police officer who's testing you, and now you've already failed. You don't just get into the car. You have to look around the car. You need to make a show of checking around the car that there's no children lying behind you or obstacles that appeared out of nowhere around the car. So you make a point of checking the car, and you check that the lights work and the blinkers work, and basically you do a full inspection that your car is safe for the road. Okay, you get into the car and you set off on the route. My number 1 advice for passing the test is imagine you are a mime. Seriously, imagine you are a mime. Like one of those guys with the white face paint and the striped black and white shirt and the beret. Why? You have to exaggerate everything you do. When you stop at a stop sign, make exaggerated motions with your head, your eyes. You're looking in your mirror. You're checking your side mirror. You move, you look over your shoulder into your blind spot. You make everything physically big to show that you know how to check all of your blind spots, your mirrors, your safe spots. If you just look in your mirrors like you normally would while you're driving, you will not pass. You have to act big. The best example of this is probably when you reach the railroad crossing. If you come to a railroad crossing in Japan, you are obligated by law to stop. Come to a complete stop before proceeding. And the police will sometimes set up checkpoints at railroad crossings. They'll have someone kind of hidden behind a fence or something, and they're watching, and then they'll radio to the sting operation that, hey, this car with the license plate didn't make a full stop at the railroad track, and then you end up getting a ticket. So it is something they check and definitely police in Japan. Do you stop at railroad crossings? But during the test, when you stop at the railroad crossing, you're going to have to physically roll down the window. I mean, maybe it's not a roll down window anymore, but you have to push the button of the window, and the window will go down, and you need to make a motion that you're listening, i.e. put your hand to your ear and cock your head out of the window a little bit to show that you're listening for the train. And then send the window back up, do another exaggerated look both ways, and then proceed across the railroad tracks. Exaggerate everything. I am not joking. You have to make a big show of all of your safety checks. The time I passed, it took me 3 times. I passed on my 3rd time, so I failed twice. The time I passed, I was doing the Japanese thing of actually talking to myself. I was like, okay, rear view, yosh. Right, migi, yosh. Hidari, yosh. Like, right side mirror, check. Left side mirror, check. I was doing that in Japanese, saying it out loud. And I don't know if that helped me pass, but I passed. Exaggerating all those things. And again, things you would absolutely not do if you were actually driving on the real road. Like, no one's going up to a railroad track and opening their window and then, cocking their ear out of the window to listen for the train. It's ridiculous. But to pass the test, that's what you have to do. Automatic fail points include things like bonking a curb with your tires. There is this narrow, snaky part, or there will be a really narrow portion of the track which is designed for you to take some corners that are very, very narrow, and if you bump the curb, you're done. So you have to have good spatial awareness, and that makes a lot of sense because of the incredibly narrow roads in Japan. You have to be ready for that. So that part of the test, I 100% understand. The second time I failed, I finished the end of the course, and the police officer said, "Good job, but your seatbelt's twisted. That's an automatic fail." And yeah, so my seatbelt wasn't situated straight and flat. It was twisted across my upper body, like it was in a kind of curlicue across my chest. And because I hadn't flattened my seatbelt to the safest position, that was an automatic fail. And I remember sitting there thinking, I'm glad I didn't say this, but I so wanted to say this. I wanted to say, really? You let me drive that entire course with my seatbelt twisted? What kind of police officer are you? And yeah, I didn't actually say that, so probably a good thing. I can't imagine that would have gone over well. But yeah, so that was an automatic fail. And I'm sure there's some other pratfalls, some other tiny details that might automatically fail you. Those are the 2 that I'm immediately aware of. Everything else is points. Like if you maybe don't exaggerate emotion quite enough, you might lose a point here and there, and you might still pass. But overall, basically, you need to exaggerate everything, have the course memorized, be sure you follow all the rules to the utmost of your ability, never hit a curb, check the car before you get in, and make sure your seatbelt is not twisted. What happens to Japanese drivers when they take this test? Well, they've just finished a driver's course in which they've been taught all of these things and they practice all these things. So they don't have a problem passing the test. Basically, if you've taken the course and the police officer sees that you've taken the course and you basically do everything all right, they pass you pretty easily. They're just much more strict on the people coming from abroad who haven't taken the Japanese driver's course. When it comes to getting your license renewed in the future, I think it's important to touch on this. You will get a hagaki, or like a postcard in the mail that says your license is coming due, and you'll take that into the police station and follow through that process. You'll do an eye test. You'll sit through like a 20 to 30 minute safety course with a video, and usually the retired police officer is going to throw a bunch of statistics at you and about accidents and the type of driving that causes accidents, etc. You'll probably watch this horrifying video about how your life will be ruined if you ever drink and drive. Like, you know, basically worst case scenario. Like this guy drove home and he was drinking and he did a hit and run, and so you know, he's in jail now, and his wife divorces him, and now he's a single mother, and his children grow up as delinquents and they get into crime and start doing drugs. And it was just like, oh my god, all right. It's like the slippery slope, worst case scenario of drinking and driving. So you might watch a video like that, and that sort of thing is what you'll do to renew your license. If you don't renew your license right away, like you are out of the country for some reason, I actually came back to Japan. It was 1 year after my license had expired, and I had like 2 or 3 weeks to renew it before I would have to go through the whole driver's test process again. So I just luckily got my driver's license renewed again. I went back to the States for grad school and didn't renew my license in that time. And so there's like a limitations. They give you a year, I believe, to properly renew your license, and I got it in just under the wire. And if you've been driving for a certain number of years without an accident or a ticket, then your license becomes what they call a gold license. And then if you have a gold license, you will get cheaper rates on insurance and that kind of thing. So it's a good thing to go for. I have a gold license currently, and yeah, it's something you know, Japanese people even put that on their resume, that they have a gold license, driver license, as just an extra little feather in your cap when you're trying to get a job. I don't know if it actually does anything for employers, but maybe if you're employing, you know, you're applying for something where you're going to have to drive, maybe that does something. But yeah, it's typical to put your license status on your resume when you apply for jobs, which is actually another reason maybe to have a driver's license, even if you're not planning on driving in Japan. And personally, I use it as my ID for everything. When people ask me for an ID, like I'm checking into a hotel, or I'm sending a package, or I'm doing something at the bank, I always give my driver's license, because my foreigner registration card, my Gaikokujin Toroku Shoumeisho, my Gaijin card, or you know, the green card, residence card, alien residence card to Japan, has a lot of information on it that I don't really want to share with a hotel desk clerk or whatever. So I always give my driver's license as the ID, and you know, as a resident of Japan, that's what they accept. And it's good that they accept that, and they're supposed to accept that. So that's another reason to have a driver's license, in my opinion. But the main reason is it frees you up to explore the country in ways that you wouldn't otherwise be able to. And I hope that some views like the ones you're seeing right now are maybe convincing you that having a driver's license might be a cool thing. Like this road that I'm on right now, it's National Highway 246. There are some beautiful sightseeing spots along here, including an onsen, a waterfall, beautiful spots along the river that cut through this mountain range. Yeah, it's a beautiful, beautiful spot and really best accessible by car. Okay, there is my midweek vlog for you. I hope you enjoyed it. If you're trying to get a driver's license or you're curious about driving in Japan, I'm glad you watched it, and please check out my overall driving in Japan video last week. I only had one thing I wanted to add on to last week's video. Someone mentioned that there is a process while driving in Japan where you thank people for letting you in. Like, it's a nice thing if they let you in, you will wave to them or bow to them. And if you're in a situation where they probably can't see you in the car doing that, you flash your hazards at them. You just like flash your hazards twice by way of saying thank you. Some people also say thank you by giving a short beep of the horn, and that's one way to show thanks if someone has let you turn right in front of them. So yeah, getting used to that thank you system when people let you in or do something nice for you while you're driving. That's one thing that I should have said last week and I didn't, because I mentioned how no one honks the horn in Japan out of anger or frustration, but people do a tap, a short beep of the horn to say thank you while driving, so that does happen. Okay, please watch for my normal video, which comes out Friday night US time, Saturday morning Japan time, and I hope to see you there. This coming week's video, I'm talking about the over-tourism issue in Japan, but not from the usual angle of, wringing my hands about over-tourism being a big problem. I'm actually going to be offering some solutions. Let's talk solutions about over-tourism in Japan. So please look for that video this week, and hope to see you there. Peace. Mount Fuji. That view never gets old.